Hi, I'm Nathan and welcome to Teach the Table. Today I'm going to teach you how to play Ra. It's a German-designed board game of auctioning set in ancient Egypt. So let's set it up and I'll show you how it goes. Ra is a game set in ancient Egypt where each player is trying to win tiles in an auction. These tiles down on the bottom of the board are up for bid. And we each have different valued sun tokens here, which represent our buying power in the auction. The game is scored in 3 different phases, which they call 3 different epochs. And at the end of each epoch, the scoring is down on the bottom of the board here, which I'll go over in just a second. And then there's a final scoring in the 3rd epoch at the end of the game, where some certain things are scored that aren't scored at all in the game. On your turn, you can do one of 3 things. First thing you can do is you can draw a tile from the black bag of randomness, and it's going to go down on the bottom of the auction track there. If you draw one of these Ra tiles with the red background, it's going to go on the Ra track up on the top. So it's going to start with how many players you are. So we have a 3-player game. We start there and fill in this way. Once this reaches the end of this track, that's the end of the epoch. So we score that epoch, remove all these tiles, and start over. If you don't want to draw a tile though, the other thing you can do is if you have one of these little Gaud tiles, any tile with a yellow background, you can discard it to take any tile from the track down here. It doesn't matter where it is, you just discard your Gaud tile and you can take one, leaving an empty space in there for the time being. The last thing you can do if you don't want to do any of those things is you can call Ra, which is going to have an immediate auction right now. I'll show you how auctioning works. In an auction, each player is only going to have one opportunity to bid on this auction, and there's going to be a token here, this Ra token, that goes in front of the player who triggered the auction starting. So if I called Ra on my turn, triggering an auction, it would start with the player to my left. So they get to choose what they would bid on this. Let's say they would bid 5. The next player can choose something higher than 5, so let's pretend they bid 6, and then I could either bid my 7 here, or I could pass. So if I pass, the player who bid 6 is going to win the auction. They will get all of these tiles will go in front of them. Their 6 is going to replace this 1 out here, and they'll take the 1 back into their supply, and it's going to go face down. An auction can be triggered in one of 3 ways. The first way I already showed you, where a player says Ra and they voluntarily call an auction, then we're going to have an auction like I showed you. The other way that could happen is if anyone draws out of the bag one of these little Ra tiles with the red background, that tile is going to go on the next spot on the track here, and that's going to trigger an auction. So if I drew that tile, I would get this and it would start like so. The last way that an auction can happen is once this track is full, when it's the next player's turn, they can't draw any more tiles because it's full. So they could either use one of their Gaud tiles if they have one in front of them to exchange and get something else, or they would have to call Ra and start another auction that way. If I voluntarily call Ra to start an auction and everyone else is going to pass, I have to bid one of my tokens. So that doesn't count if this track is full and the person has no choice but to say Ra. That doesn't matter. That they don't have to bid. But if I just called Ra on my own, I would have to be prepared to at least bid one of my tokens. Unless someone else bids, then you're not obligated to do so. If you draw one of the Ra tiles here triggering an auction and everyone passes, these tiles are all going to stay out here and will just continue as normal. So that was just an opportunity for people to buy these if they wanted them, but maybe everyone wants to kind of sweeten the pot here a little more. So these will all stay out here. If the auction track down here is full and someone calls a Ra because they have to, and everyone passes at that point, all of these tiles are going to just go away from the game. They'll go back in the box, never to be seen again. There is a press your luck element to this game where if you keep waiting and waiting and waiting to spend your little suns to bid on something, you might not have an opportunity to do so. And here's why. Every time one of these Ra tokens comes up here, it's going to trigger an auction. That gives you an opportunity to bid. But when the last one comes out, that stops. No more auctioning happens. No auction happens because of that tile. That just triggers the end of the epoch. So all the tiles that are still on the board are going to go back in the box, and we're going to score after each epoch. And I'll show you how that happens next. At the end of each epoch, we're going to look at all the tiles that each player has in front of them and score them appropriately. They're all a little bit different, but starting with the Gaud tiles, so there's actually 8 of these in the game. They're all a little bit different on the face of them, but they all score the same. So if you didn't use them for their action of taking some tiles from the auction track, and you still have these in your supply at the end of the epoch, each one of these is going to score you 2 points. The next ones here are these gold tiles. Each gold tile in your possession scores you 3 points, represented by the 3 little gold icons on there. The pharaohs score a little bit differently, and it's whoever has the most of these and whoever has the least of these. So the person with the most pharaohs is going to get 5 points. The person with the least pharaohs is going to get -2 points. So we each start the game before it even starts. We start with a little tablet here representing 10 points. And so there is a way that you can actually end up at the end of the first epoch losing points. Next we have the Nile and the Flood. Now these are each going to be worth 1 point if they're in your supply, but you have to have at least 1 Flood token in your supply to score that at all. So if I just had this and just 2 Nile tokens with the picture of the Nile River on there, that's not going to get me any points unless I have this Flood, in which case that would be 3 points total. These tiles with the gray backgrounds are called civilizations. There's 5 different ones, and they're kind of represented by different colors and what the people are wearing, so you can keep them straight. And these are going to get you points for how many different ones you've had. So if I had 3 blue ones, it doesn't really matter, but if I had a blue, a red, and a white, that would be 5 points. If I had 4 different ones, it would be 10 points. And if I had 5, all of them, that's 15 points. If I had none of them, it's actually a -5 points. So you need to have at least 1, but if you don't have at least 3 different ones, it's not going to get you negative points, but it's not going to get you positive points at all. It starts when you have 3, so 5, 10, and 15. Lastly, down here on the bottom, we have the monuments. There are 8 different representations of monuments in the game, and these will not score anything for you until the end of the 3rd epoch, so at the very end of the game. But the way that they're going to score is 2 different ways. First, you're going to be trying to collect at least 1 of all the different ones, so they're all represented, and then you also will score if you have multiples of at least 3 of the same ones. So starting out, if you had, let's say you had 6 different ones represented on your tableau, that would get you 6 points, so basically 1 for each. It starts ramping up though. Once you have 7, that's not worth 7 points, that's worth 10 points. And when you have all 8 represented, it's 15. So it's 1 at a time through the first 6. Once you have that one, it's worth 10, and the last one is 15 points total. Then you're going to look at each individual one, and if you have any multiples of 3, 4, or 5, they will get you 5, 10, or 15 points. So it's the same numeration as these ones up here. If you had 3 of them, that's 5, 10, and 15 points. In this case, if you had 3 of these, it would be 5, 10, and 15 points. So that would be 10 right there for having 4. After scoring at the end of an epoch, a lot of these tiles are going to go away. So obviously the monuments will stay out because you don't even score those until the end. They just keep collecting. But all the civilizations are going to go back to the box. Your flood token, if you have one, is going to go back to the box. So you get to keep your Niles. And then your gold will go back, and all the gods that you just scored will go back in the box, never to be seen again. So again, you're only going to have monuments, any of your Nile tokens, and then your pharaohs. After getting rid of all those tiles, each player is going to be able to flip over their little sun tiles so they know what they have in the next auction. And then they're going to start the next epoch the same way they started their first. So they can start drawing tiles or calling raw to auction. Keep in mind that part of the strategy is not only to bid on the tiles that are in the tile track here, but also you're going to get this tile back in your supply. So let's say that you want to bid with 7, your 7 goes in the middle up here, and this 6, which is the winning bid from the previous auction, is going to go back into your hand face down. So you can't use it during this epoch, but at the beginning of the next epoch it'll flip over, and that will give you more buying power. So if there's a really high valued one out there, and even some really crappy tiles down here, it might be worth at least putting some sort of a bid in, because you'll get a 12 in the next epoch. Even if you're in the 3rd epoch, there still is power to the tiles that you gather from the board, because at the end of the game, at the end of the very last epoch, the 3rd epoch, you're going to flip over all of these, and you won't be able to use them to bid anymore because the game is over. But you do score these, so you're going to take the sum total of all the numbers that you have and compare it to everyone else. So whoever has the highest sum is going to get a bonus of 5 points, and whoever has the lowest sum is going to get -5 points. So there still is strategy, even if you're in the 3rd epoch, to really consider what that tile is out there. The last thing to show you is that there are some of these tiles with black borders, as seen here, and those are called disasters in this game. So they're going to have a negative effect of 2 tiles out of your collection once this is purchased by you. So if you won this auction, you're going to take all of these tiles and add them to your collection that you already have growing, and then you're going to resolve the effects of these disasters one at a time. So this one would make you destroy 2 monuments from your collection. So if you only had 1 or you had none, it's going to have less of an effect. There's no penalty if you're not able to discard 2. You just have to do it if you can. This one you would discard 2 of your civilizations. This one you would discard 2 of your pharaohs. And lastly, this one is a drought, so you're going to discard 2 of your Nile and flood cards. However, the flood cards, when it came to scoring, are the most important. If you don't have any floods, then you're not going to score these at all. So those being a little bit more valuable, you're going to have to discard your floods if you have them. So if you only had 1 flood and 1 Nile, you would discard both of those. But if you had 2 floods, those are the ones you have to discard with this one. So keep that in mind. Not all the auctions out here are just going to have puppies and cupcakes in there. Sometimes there's something bad that you're going to have to resolve as well. After scoring at the end of the game, you're going to total up how many points you have, represented by these little point tablets here, and add them all up, and whoever has the most points is going to be the winner of the game. If there's a tie at this point, whoever has the highest numbered sun, so it's not the highest sum, but the highest numbered one, is going to be the winner. And that's the end. Hi, I'm Nathan, and welcome to Teach the Table. Today I'm going to teach you how to play Ra. It's a German-designed board game of auctioning set in ancient Egypt. So let's set it up and I'll show you how it goes. So that's how you play Ra. The game's been out for a while, but there's a newer edition out now, so some of the components might look different than what you have at your table, but the basic gameplay is still the same. It's also worth mentioning there are some files, if you go on Board Game Geek or Google, there are some files that you can download that make the game a little bit easier for organizing all of your little tiles, as well as telling you which ones are going to stay out and which ones go away. So that might be worth it too if you're trying to teach the game a little bit quicker. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.